Welcome to the Law Spot Podcast with your host, Melissa Gray. Join her as she highlights legal professionals and trending legal issues facing entrepreneurs and small business owners. Ready to dive into life and law? You're in the right spot.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Law Spot. I'm very excited about our guest today, Miss Kassi Burns, a senior attorney in King Spalding's eDiscovery practice. She is on the cutting edge of all things emerging tech, talks about NFTs, crypto, Web3, and all things eDiscovery. So please let me introduce you to Kassi.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that intro very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We're happy to have you. I know that you actually also have a podcast on Fridays with your colleagues on eDiscovery, and it's really interesting. So if you get a chance, check it out. But to start, would you mind just sharing with our listeners how you, your background and how you got into eDiscovery and where you are today?
Yes, I will. It's been a journey. I will definitely say it's had its hills, it's had its valleys, it's had its crevasses. But here I am today, King and Spalding. I started my career back in 2006. I just graduated from law school, Tulane Law School, had my last year of law school when Hurricane Katrina hit. So that was like my first rumbling that this is going to be a bumpy ride. And I ended up getting a job right out of law school, working in-house for a company, doing exactly what I knew I wanted to do. I really wanted to practice intellectual property like you. I wanted to do trademark and copyright law. And I found my way working for a startup franchise company based in New Orleans, which is where I was able to get exposed to things like trademarks and copyrights, because like those are very core elements to a franchise business. Well, I ended up being literally the last employee because it ended up going into bankruptcy, into liquidation, and really was a very stressful, and there's more to that. There's not enough time in this podcast right now to go into all of that, but I found myself in 2008, which was a very hard time to be looking for a job, needing to just make some money because I was literally the last employee, right? And someone, his name is Scott Bruce in the Dallas area, reached out to me via Career Builder and said, hey, and I was still in New Orleans at this time, and said, hey, if you can come to Dallas, like right now, I'll have a job for you on a doc review project. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'm originally from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It got me close to home. I didn't have to be barred in Texas. I was originally barred in Arkansas because of the Hurricane Katrina thing. Again, another great story for another time. And just was a doc review attorney. And honestly, I loved it because I knew I was getting paid every week, and it was very stress-free compared to what I had been experiencing the past 2 years. So I did it, and I did a good job of it. Very interesting cases, trademark cases. So it caught my fancy. But I was very interested in the technology around just the doc review, because I started getting involved in doc review, document review for litigation, right whenever things like email threading were starting to be used, and technology assisted review, the first iteration of it, were first being used. And I knew that I needed to follow the technology. So I started as a doc review attorney, got promoted at a certain point to be an assistant manager, and then a manager of ultimately over 200 attorneys, managing like huge litigation, helping all the way to trial. And I really like the logic behind it, the logic, the technology, and how that intersects with the actual forward momentum of a case. And because I knew I always wanted to follow technology, I knew I wanted to work on the vendor side for a while, because I knew that that's how I would really learn the technology. So a vendor that we worked with on one of my big projects, they ended up hiring me to be a manager of their lit support department, which is kind of crazy because I knew I had a natural inclination for understanding just kind of like the architecture of the technology, but I didn't know how to do all of it myself. I just kind of was like, I know you can do this, and I know you can't do that. But I was also good at managing people. And that's really what they wanted, was a good manager, a good project manager, because a good manager of any department, of whether you're an attorney managing or you're a tech person managing, having those project management skills are just really a huge soft skill that people don't talk about. So spent 5 years working there in the DC area, really got my tech chops big time. Really had to learn to be comfortable with maybe not being the smartest person in the room, but being okay with that and knowing when to like pull in the right people and when, yeah, I need to handle this. Went from there, moved back here, worked for another service provider, being more client facing, engaging, and realized I really like working with clients. I was kind of behind the scenes managing people. I got back managing directly with cases and clients, and then eventually made my way to King and Spalding, which is where I am now. And I've been there for a year and a half, working in the Discovery Center, and, being able to do things that I wasn't able to do on the service provider side because I am on the firm side. So being able to help with motion practice and things like that. So it has definitely come full circle in a way. If I had told myself in 2007, 2008, that this is where I would be, would not have believed it. And I really love my career right now. I love doing what I'm doing. I love data. I love the technical side of things, but I also like the legal side of it. So I'm never bored ever. And I'm constantly working because I want to. It's not because it's not something I dread. Every like Monday, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's get going. So to anyone who's out there who's really at a low spot, that low spot is valid. Trust me, I had times in my life where it was rough and I really regretted going to law school. But I'm so happy I am where I am now because that going through the trenches like I did, it gives me the skill set I have now I would never have had before. So it's definitely a journey.
Well, it's good and to mention soft skills, they're grossly underestimated in the legal profession. So to be able to manage people and follow your strengths and then ultimately find something that you're passionate about is just I wanted people to hear that because I think it's not every path has to be linear
Right.
for where you get to where you are. And now having practiced, 13, 14 years, what does your day-to-day look like? And, what keeps you motivated and not dreading Monday mornings?
Yeah, so it can vary a lot. I think, for most attorneys, it's fairly, I would imagine, not unusual to have a varied, what typical day, but it's not uncommon for me to, again, be helping more than I did ever before with motion practice. So if there's ever any sort of, motion to compel, motion for sanctions, or even earlier on, negotiating ESI protocols, protective orders, meet and confer, draft response letters, things like that. Like I'm very heavily involved with that. So I'm able to like write a lot more than maybe I did before when I was working on the service provider side. I'm still in databases, running searches, checking on how things are going, helping set things up. Sometimes I'm on smaller projects and more intimately involved, and sometimes I'm at a higher level and able to bring in other people. And that also gives me an opportunity to kind of show my skills to some of my colleagues in the law firm. I just have more of the technical skills because I worked on the service provider side. So it gives me an opportunity to kind of share that knowledge with other people. Because at the end of the day, the more you understand like why this works that way, it makes you better able to troubleshoot and problem solve. So yeah, just sometimes I'm in the database, getting my hands dirty with the data. A lot of thought leadership. I really think it's important to, there's a lot of forward momentum going on with emerging technology. So kind of keeping my eye out there, making clients aware of it, seeing what the new case laws are that are out there, making recommendations to clients just on their standard operating procedures on how things might need to get updated. So it runs the gamut of what I do.
Well, so you see a lot. You've been in it since,
Mm-hmm.
email threads, so emerging technologies, and then we're at the forefront now with AI and everything that's happening in that space. So tell us what you're seeing and how people that are practicing today can stay, apprised of what's going on, but also be aware so they can advise their clients better, regardless of their practice areas, because some of the stuff that's coming down the pipe is somewhat concerning, but also just because they don't know what it is even more daunting or could cause people to pause.
Right. And I'm going to talk about two different categories. I'm going to talk about things that are currently flowing through the courts that it's tech we've been dealing with 10 or so years. And then I'll kind of touch on the emerging tech that we need to be aware of that we'll be dealing with in the next 5+ years. So the most immediate thing that we're dealing with in, discovery is mobile data, which mobile data we've had in, prolific way for quite a while. But whenever I worked on the service provider side, it was before COVID, and it wasn't that common when parties would ask for mobile data. I think it was kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I won't ask for yours if you won't ask for mine. And I think people would say, we have policies in place and our employees don't use it for professional use, whatever. COVID, that kind of like wiped it all out. And now I don't see a case where you're not asking for text messages and Teams data and Slack and Zoom, all of that. And that's very challenging data to preserve, collect, review, produce. It's challenging from a technical perspective. It's challenging from a legal perspective of where do you draw the line of what's relevant and not relevant? When a thread, you may respond with emojis and GIFs, so what I need to produce the GIF or not? I don't know. So that element is challenging. And I think there are some companies who aren't aware, and maybe some attorneys who aren't aware. There has been a temperature in the courts where we're seeing more and more spoliation claims being brought against other parties. And the court's bringing sanctions against them because they're not properly preserving data. And that can unfortunately have a significant impact to the outcome of the case. So if you're not sufficiently preserving that data and there's a potential for spoliation, depending on like the facts around that incident, a judge could say, you know what, I'm going to enter a default judgment on the other side, or I'm going to, give an adverse inference, or I'm going to like bring a fine against you and the attorney, and maybe the attorney might have to go to ethics class. So courts are really, drawing a pretty hard line and really expecting people to be on top of this. So if it's something that comes up in court, you're nearly behind the ball. You really need to be aware of what data sources your clients may be using and what obligations there are to preserve that data. So that's just a huge one that people need to be aware of. As far as like current old tech that's now currently in the courts.
So if you're going to counsel maybe our in-house colleagues on this request for mobile data in a litigation context, what can they do today or what should they audit internally to make sure that they're making it as easy as they can to not get hit with a spoliation claim and preserve that for in a litigation context?
I think it's really taking the time to review those standard operating procedures that hopefully exist regarding, your retention policies, your bring your own device, or, company provided phone policies, your collection policies, if you're doing that in-house or you're leveraging a vendor. I think it's just being aware that this is going to be something you need to get your arms wrapped around. Are you updating your hold notice language? Like, does your hold notice sufficiently address that? Does your questionnaire that goes out sufficiently address that? What systems do you have in place that have auto deletion features? And if you are using a system with auto deletion features, can you toggle that off? And if you can't, you need to know that so you can tell your employees you can't use this in the context of these discussions, because that will get you in trouble. You can't just say, well, you know what, this app, I can't turn it off. The court, there's been case law that say you have to use a different mechanism to communicate. Like just saying, I can't use it, like I can't turn it off isn't good enough. So I think just being aware of that, doing that audit, doing that review. It's probably been like 5 or so years since you've done a review of your operating procedures. This is a really good time, to do it now. And then also think about how you maybe want to address some other emerging tech things like using generative AI. But I think it's really is important to get your arms wrapped around what your employees are really using, and making sure those policies and procedures around preservation collection are there, and also being aware of privacy issues. If you're a company that has employees in California, there are emerging privacy laws that are coming out there where if there's a bring your own device policy by the company and you want to collect an employee's data and they're in California, there's consent steps that have to be taken. So, just being aware that there's a changing landscape going on out there. And I know sometimes SOPs are not the funnest thing in the world to review and update, but this is really a perfect time to get that under control. So, you can say, what, this is solid footing, and you don't want to have to be dealing with it in a motion to compel.
A few things. When I was in-house, there were employees that retained emails for 12, 13 years. And so recognizing in a litigation context that someone is going to get that entire thing. And these new tools, like you mentioned, I just want to reiterate those, like Slack and internal apps that you might not think could warrant a litigation hold. They are communications within your company that are likely going to be discoverable. So the retention policies on all of those things, that's a really good point, that just dust those off. And to the extent you can have some sort of auto archive or auto delete, it's actually in your company's best interest to do that. It cuts down on your costs too.
Right. The data disposition, I think, is very important. That's a great point. Look at your data retention policies, and as long as there's not a federal regulatory or litigation requirement to hold on to data and that time has passed, you want to defensively delete that and not have that on for multiple reasons. The costs associated with it, and it's really frustrating whenever data gets brought into litigation that could have been deleted, but it just wasn't done, and I think we're always forward looking. We're not really that good at auditing, looking back and seeing what we like creating data and moving on, but it really is in your best interest to defensively delete that data when possible, because it just saves volume and time down the road. So I think that's an excellent point, Melissa.
Okay, so that's what people can do today with what's going on. What do we need to know that you're about emerging techs, maybe today in the next 5 years, with this slurry of new technologies, ChatGPT, Jasper, all of the metaverse? What are you seeing? And maybe give us your assessment of the landscape, and then what we can expect in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I think emerging tech is a very broad bucket, and there are a lot of technologies that I would say fall under it. Some of it are maybe not as emerging, and they've been around a little bit longer, like blockchain. So that would be Bitcoin or Ethereum. We're also seeing, I think more specifically in the past 3 months or so, generative AI has really entered the chat. I mean, they've rolled in pretty hard, and it's getting a lot of attention. There's a lot of companies springing up, a lot of apps springing up that's using generative AI, ChatGPT being the most probably talked about. And really what that is ChatGPT uses large language models. I think the most current version is up to it has data sourced from up to January 2023, I think. And it uses natural language processing to give an output. So you can ask a question like you're talking me to you, hey, Melissa, what are 5 interesting facts about, copyright law? And it'll give you that output. And then you could say, oh, but can you rewrite that to make it search engine optimized? So it's refining its answer. You don't have to know special search syntax or Python code to get the output you want. You can really just engage in it very simply. And then what it's doing is it's learning over time, and it's refining its output based off of the input that you give it. So That in and of itself, that generative AI, which is sometimes text and sometimes image based, it's really gotten much more advanced in just the past 6 months. And, I think what that's going to do is create authentication issues in courts. So, part of that is deepfake technology, where I think we've all seen videos of someone acting like Tom Cruise, and it really looks like Tom Cruise, but it's not. And I think it just came out in the news that Drake and The Weeknd, someone scraped audio and visuals of them to create music in the style of them. So that creates a bunch of issues, as you know, in the trademark copyright space. It creates a lot of issues in the court case. Just think of what would happen if someone created evidence, fake evidence, using generative AI. What sort of metadata? How are we going to track that? What are we going to do to know whether or not that authentically came from my phone or not, or that is authentically a picture of me or not, or that is actually a video of me saying these things? And then even, ChatGPT is going to be integrated with Microsoft 365. So you can actually enter prompts at some point in Word. You'll be able to say, pull this information, pull that information, and write me a summary. Well, who's the author at that point? And when that person has written something using that technology, and maybe that document is used in court and they're under cross-examination, what's their ability to say, that wasn't me, that was ChatGPT? So what artifacts will there be to the underlying technology for us to know what portion of that text did I draft and what portion of it was auto-generated based off of a prompt that I entered, and what was that prompt? So I think it'll create a lot more technical points of authentication in courts that we're starting to see a little bit. Last year, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case had, photographic evidence was a huge deal. And there was an expert that came on that said some of her images were faked. The metadata I think it was the date metadata was fake. So we're going to see that just with the actual image itself. Not that, you can still Photoshop now. You've been able to Photoshop a while, but I think it is so much easier now that it's going to, I think, digital forensic experts are probably going to be very much in demand. I think copyright and trademark attorneys are going to be in demand. There's just a lot of interesting, challenging issues that we're going to have to deal with that you just can't take for granted. So, that's one thing. But then even kind of maybe on, the other end of the spectrum, blockchain and cryptocurrencies, if you're an attorney, you think, oh, that's kind of, I'm a trust and estates attorney, I don't need to know about that, right? It's scam stuff. Well, it's really important to understand how digital assets are usually held. Usually they're held in a wallet, a cold wallet or a hot wallet. And really what that is it's a remote, external hard drive in very simple terms, or it's an app online. And the cold version is the one that's further removed from bad actors, and the hot version is the one that's online. Well, to access my wallet, I don't log in with my username and password. You have to know your seed phrase that was auto-generated when you set that wallet up. And it is usually like a 12 or 16 word phrase. And if you lose that seed phrase, you're never accessing that wallet. It's gone. It's a brick, So if you're a trust and estate attorney and you're not talking to your clients about, do you have digital assets? Where are they stored? Where is your seed phrase stored? I know people in this space where once they get a wallet, they get a metal bar and they engrave the seed phrases into a metal bar, and then they go and they put it in a safety deposit box in the bank, because that is the most secure way to do that, So, being aware of those things, or even being aware of the volatility of cryptocurrencies. If you're a family law attorney and you have a client where your client is like, hey, I invested early in Bitcoin or in Ethereum, and I want all the crypto assets, and I'm going to let my spouse get everything else, and that goes upside down. I saw some discourse on Twitter where a guy did that and did it right before, a lot of the prices fell. And he was just like, I lost so much of my assets, and there's nothing you can do about it at that point. So I think just because you don't think it's going to be successful or you think it might be scammy, you still need to be aware of it and be able to properly advise clients about it.
That's a great example on the family law and trust and estates piece, because even if it's not relevant to your practice area, it's still relevant to your practice area. And that
Right.
goes to the contract space as well. So at any transaction, we need to be thinking about what the emerging tech is and how those clauses are being impacted with it. So what have you seen from like a contract review standpoint on how people are starting to integrate that? And then I'll share what I've observed.
Yeah, I have a good friend who is a transactional attorney. She works in-house for, a company that has a lot of very nice properties, and engaging in a contract, and the other side wanted to snuck in language that gave themselves rights to record video of the likeness of the properties to then use in augmented reality or virtual reality. Now, my friend, of course, struck that out, but hopefully any good contract attorney is keeping an eye for all language. They're not just an autopilot, but just be aware of what that you may be giving away. Or even an individual, if you're engaging in a contract and you're, maybe it's even something as simple as you're getting headshots. Like, you want to make sure how those images are being used. If someone's an influencer out there, influencer marketing is huge. What are you giving away? Are you giving all future rights to your likeness away in that kind of a contract? So again, it may not be something that's important to you, but it may be important to other people. And it doesn't mean people may try to broaden what rights they're giving themselves in the contracts.
So what is going on today in this space? Because I can see this being used in a lot of nefarious ways by bad actors. They're stealing your image, they're presenting it to your family for a ransom demand, or they're recording your voice. Someone could emulate even mine on this podcast, or Tom Cruise's, or Drake had a whole song generated. So what's going on today from a regulation standpoint, or what can we see come down on how to protect ourselves and businesses as we sort of navigate this new path?
I mean, I think of my friend Jerry, who I do have a podcast with. He's a digital forensics expert, and our podcast is All Your Data if you want to check it out. But he's talked about having, kind of like a passcode with his family. So if he randomly calls, it's not him, it's a synthetic version of him. They know to ask a question, and if that other side doesn't know how to answer, it's probably not him. It's very much like giving Blade Runner replicant testing vibes, right? So I think he was very concerned about his wife and his children. I had the opposite concern. My parents live with me, my husband and I. We don't have kids, but my parents are our kids. But it's not uncommon for, people committing fraud to target older people. And I think just explaining that to people, like, if I randomly call you asking for money, that's not ever going to be me, So I think being aware of that, I think if you want to play around with ChatGPT or those other tools, first make sure if you're using your company device, it's not in violation of a policy, corporate policy, but also be aware what information you're feeding in as your prompt, what your input is. Because usually I think if it's open, if you're just going online and engaging with it, that information is being retained as, training data. So you definitely don't want to be sharing anything proprietary. You don't want to be sharing anything privileged or confidential, because that's just kind of like going out there to a company and you don't know what's going to happen with it. So I think just being aware, just because you're entering information in a website, on a work computer, it doesn't mean that it's protected by whomever receives the data. So I think that's very important. And we're seeing European countries are kind of paying attention to some of these tools. Italy has come out and said, hey, ChatGPT, we don't want you being active here because we need more transparency about, where your data sources come from. We need more transparency. We need to know that you're accurately screening your users to make sure they're adults. We need to make sure that the output accurately reflects people's information. And then there's a European Data Privacy and Security Board that's looking into it. So, I think that kind of taps into broader discussions of AI ethics, and how all these big fun tools are being, blown out there and being available, but what sort of regulatory use or discussions will there be around it? Whether it's the training data, was it ethically sourced? We're seeing, again, I'm sure trademark, copyright infringement issues. Did you scrape copyright protected information? So being aware of that, but also being aware on the flip side of copyrights and patents, if you get an output from one of those systems, it's probably not going to get protected by copyright or patent law, right? I mean, because there's no human, what is the element of the human, input that led to the creation of the work. So I think just being aware of those issues and being thoughtful, like if you're wanting to write something that you really want copyright protection on, don't take a shortcut because, you may run into problems. And I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I mean, I just imagine there's going to be a wellspring in copyright disputes, a lot of authentication of, did that person actually create that all on their own, So I think that that's all going to be very interesting.
Yeah, the Copyright Office has considered it essentially like they've denied a completely AI generated work copyright protection, but there is still an open question of how much human authorship has to go in order to warrant it. But in that case, he was actually filing on behalf of like the AI. So it was an interesting one, but it's coming. There's actually the USPTO has issued some open forums about it, so they can have some more discussions about what people want to see and how that's going to be impacted, and even on the being proactive about filing. If you're in-house and you can see your products being used in a digital space, a lot of luxury retailers and in the fashion industry in particular, but even to your point, like okay, let's say you have a look and feel of a golf course or some sort of virtual space where in a contract you said that person could use it. Well then, okay, do you really want something in the metaverse to look like what is a trademark of your business in another space? So being proactive about filing in those digital classes is a message that sort of we're putting out there, but also just don't use ChatGPT to draft things at the moment unless you're sure, especially on the copywriter side. Like if you are looking for authorship, that's probably not a good way to go, especially if you don't know where it came from. But
right. And I think that's the other thing. It's the authentication. I'm playing around with it on my personal computer, not my work one. Sure. But, for me, a lot of it, some of it playing around with it, some of it, a lot of people who write have a problem with the blank page. So if it can kickstart your thought, like get an outline and that can kind of get you going. And I used it kind of like, I just want to see what the output is, and it's easy content. And I'm disclosing in my captions when I do use it because I just want to be transparent about that. But I made sure to Google everything that I did. I validated everything before I shared it because, it would be interesting. I think that it would be interesting. And in eDiscovery, we use machine learning all the time, and we use advanced analytics, AI in an adversarial setting. So we're very much keyed in on how rich is our data set. Is it robust enough? How was our sampling, to like kick off the, our initial set of data that we reviewed that kind of kicks off the algorithm, and, testing and validating the results and making sure you're hitting sufficient stabilization. I would love, and there's like a rank of, how relevant is it, so it nearly would love to see a similar type of metric tied to it, or, a link back maybe to the underlying data source. I mean, I don't know if they're probably, they don't want to disclose that information, I'm sure, because they probably maybe give too much away. But I think like that level of transparency would be really important, because I think in the short term, it may create a lot of easy content, you be able to kickstart a lot of things. But if people aren't validating it, it's like when you compress a file and you compress it and you compress it and you compress it, like there's a level of degradation that happens to the quality of the file. So if there's one generative AI tool or some multiple out there that are used to validate and write code. Well, that may not be the best code though. So if we're continuously like building our software systems off of code that maybe not be optimized or validated, it's like, what's going to happen to the integrity of these systems over time? So, I think that using it to maybe kickstart or do repeated work or I think there's a lot of value to it, but I think we have to be realistic of, just because a computer does it doesn't mean it's always right. And it requires people with skill and aptitude to really manage that and make sure the output is what you're expecting and refine it and tweak it over time.
Right. So if someone wants to learn more about, you're big on your book a week, right? What's on your bedside? What are you reading about emerging tech?
So I feel really bad. I don't have the book in front of me, and the book is about digital content creators and like the opportunity that we're kind of on the cusp of potentially kind of a renaissance of independent artists using digital assets. And the author is, oh my gosh, I think his name is Ed Lee. I can't remember. I feel so bad. I should have been more prepared.
I'll put it in the show notes, but I love that you give those recommendations to people on LinkedIn, and you always have educational things that you sort of push. So where can people find you and follow the latest on eDiscovery and emerging tech?
Well, I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So my personal LinkedIn account, which Kassi Burns. And then I have a few kind of professional like side accounts that I manage in my free time. I have an eDiscovery focused account called eDiscoverist, where I just kind of like try to give out a few tidbits of information, and then also the All Your Data podcast, and we have some content that we create around it. But it's largely driven on how much free time we have, which varies from week to week. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for devoting some of that time to me. I know that people will find value in these topics, and I look forward to seeing what you do next on LinkedIn, because they're always super fun posts. But I will link that book in the show notes. Kassi, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. We'll talk soon.